Okay, all right. I guess it's 11 a.m. already. Welcome to our webinar for today. My name is Clifford Edomiade. I'll be the moderator for today's event. So I want to thank you for joining. I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful time today. I'll be very brief in the introduction so that we'll have time for the presentation. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so getting the best out of this webinar is going to be a 1-hour session, but we might exceed that. But we'll try as much as we can to stay within the allotted time. And for this particular webinar, I would want to let you know that it is currently being streamed on LinkedIn. So if you go on LinkedIn on our page, you will see the webinar as a live video. And the second thing is about taking questions. I know that during the course of the presentation, you may have questions you want to ask the guest speaker. So for this particular webinar, we expect that you send your questions through the chat. So if you look at the bottom of your device, you will see the chat button. So if you have any question at any point in time, just drop your questions on the chat button. And this video will be recorded, it's currently being recorded, and it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. I will send a link to you as soon as the video is uploaded. And for the controls, due to the limited time we have and also to avoid distractions, only the guest speaker and the moderator are allowed to speak, video or their screen. So please, I want to beg us to kindly adhere to these instructions. So we don't want you to turn on your video or share your screen because it might interfere with the entire event today. And if you do have any question whatsoever, even after this webinar, you can always reach out to us and we'll be willing to take your questions and take necessary actions. Again, I want to say that you send your questions along the course of the presentation to the chat box, and we'll try as much as we can to take as many questions as possible. But we do not guarantee that we're going to take all the questions. So for the ones we do not take, we'll look for the best way to take those questions and communicate our responses back to you. So right now, I'm going to start a poll just to learn more about your industry and also how you get to know about us. So we collect this information to help us improve on our subsequent webinars. So please kindly help us fill the poll questions. So I've launched the poll, it's on your screen. Fill the poll questions, and during the course of the presentation as well, there will be another poll question which the presenter will launch. So I encourage you as well to help us fill the poll questions, as the information we collect is for marketing purposes only and to know more about those who attend the webinar. And I think that's about it from my end. I'm very, very expectant. I've got my notes and my books here as well. It's a great privilege to moderate this session with Adaobi Igwe Okerekiocha. So I'll give her the floor to introduce herself and then, share her thoughts with us.
Okay, good morning, guys. Just a quick check on if you can hear me. Clifford, if you could just help me confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. Thank you for being a part of the event. So just by way of introduction, my name is Adobe Ukerekocha. I've been in the fintech space for about 12 years. But essentially, in those 12 years, I've taken on different roles and different functions within the organization and within the fintech space. I originally started off as a software engineer before transitioning into more customer-facing roles, heavily focused on implementation, service delivery, managing operational teams. Then I think somewhere along my journey, I realized that my first love was always going to still be around creating solutions, creating products. So I decided to go back in 2018 into the product development space, but this time around not as a software developer, but as a product manager. Okay, so that's kind of like a brief introduction about me. So what we hope to achieve today is really just to give you some soft landing into product management. Hopefully share some of the experiences that I have, and then kind of give you some of the tools that can get you started. Okay. So we're just going to take some definitions out of the way very quickly, some academic, conversations out of the slides very quickly. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the evolution of product management. And the reason why I want to share this is because I want you to see how the discipline has grown. It's quite young, when you compare it to things like, medicine, and other professional, disciplines. It's quite young. Initially started off, in companies like in the FMCG space. So for instance, Procter & Gamble, they had this concept of creating a role, called brand men. And it was really focused on, a set of people who had this unique skill of, packaging a product, packaging a product. I think there's a hot mic. Okay. So they had this unique skill of packaging a product, how, they had skills to promote the product in a way that would, resonate with customers, in a way that customers could connect with it, right? And so they were what you would call your typical, product marketing guys. But then much later, as the discipline starts to evolve, we realize, especially for, companies that do a lot of things around, okay, guys, just a quick check. Can you see my screen?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure you've shared your screen.
Okay, it tells me I'm sharing my screen at the moment. Okay, Manuel can see my screen.
Okay.
I can see your screen.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you, guys. Okay, so in the course of the discipline evolving, we began to realize that the feedback from a customer doesn't have to come at the end. Imagine building something all the way up to when you're about to promote it, and then you suddenly have a launch fail because you realized it doesn't really resonate or connect with the customers that you actually targeted. So it became very important, right, to start to inculcate and integrate customer feedback much, much earlier in the product development cycle. So this concept of voice of customer began to come up and began to play a very strategic, role in the product development cycle. Now, as things progress, it also became important not just to talk about, the features and the value to the customer and the things that the customer is looking for someone to solve. It also became more important as well to ensure that the process or the way in which we're delivering the products in themselves is optimal. Okay, so there's been a lot of buzz, around Agile, around Scrum, around Kanban. It's essentially just also putting, optimizing the process in which the product in itself is delivered. And the good thing about this is because if you can optimize how you're creating your products, it means you can quickly, launch stepwise, launch in iterations, and circle back the insights and the feedback you're getting on the field and as customers are using back into the product development process, right? So it became important, not just about what is being built, but how it is being built. Okay. Then, Agile and Scrum and the Kanban, concepts have really, really started from, the smallest units of software development, which is in the product engineering team, right? But because of its impact, most startups, most organizations right now are looking at how to take that principle of Agile and scaling it to the enterprise, right? It's now no longer about just your software development pipeline. It's also about getting the organization and the business as well to be agile and quickly, respond to market changes, to what customers are really asking for, right? So again, it has evolved from marketing, promotions, to getting the voice of the customer early on in the process, to optimizing how your software is being developed, the process it goes through in development, and then even taking it beyond software development to the entire organization. So that's how it's evolved over time. Okay, I see some people raising their hands. I think some of the ground rules Clifford set was, if you have questions, you can type it in the chat group, or if you want to make some comments, you can put it in there so that you can attend to it in a more organized way. Okay, so let's just define what product management is. I'm going with the 280 group definition, and these are really thought leaders in the area of product management. They define it really as a role and a function within an organization that is responsible for the overall product success. Now, that's a very, very big word, overall success, okay? That just means everything and anything in between that ensures that your product is successful. That means there will be a couple of metrics that you are going to be, comparing, your product performance against, and those are the things that will determine if you're successful or not. But what I wanted to point out in this definition is that the product manager's focus is essentially around the overall success. But guess what? The product manager isn't building alone. The product manager is not a software developer. The product manager may not be a user experience guru, but he needs to work with each of these functions within the organization to deliver on these values. Okay. The interesting thing is, the product manager is at the center of innovation. He's balancing his interest is ensuring that whatever products we're pushing out there is viable. There is a way to make money out of it. It is desirable. It is really a problem that is important enough to solve. And people want that problem to be solved. People are willing to pay for that problem to be solved, right? And it needs to be engineered. What technology is available at the time, right, to capture this value and to capture this opportunity. And, the product manager's dilemma is balancing out this entire disciplines together and navigating the organization towards innovating, for the customer. Now, the interesting thing is that in most organizations that you will go, you will find that, and if you do any light research online, you probably will see this Venn diagram, right? Which, when they tell you what is the space of a product manager, they'll tell you it's kind of like the convergence between the user experience, UX, the tech, and the business, right? And the product manager is kind of smack in between. Now, like I said earlier, right, from a RACI matrix point of view, you will have different functions within the organization already performing these specific functions. So you may have a UX team already, or what we call a product design team already. You probably already have, in some organizations, they may have separated the business function from the product management function. And you probably also have your engineering team, okay? And then probably your technology team as well. But the interesting thing is that they may be responsible for elements in your product, but you are ultimately accountable, okay? And what I then see, and then it comes as no surprise, because one of the things I always see as a very interesting topic in the product management space is a lot of people say there is kind of like a crisis, a crisis of identity, right? There's an identity crisis. People call me the CEO of my products. People say, I'm accountable for the success of the product. And even from time to time, I see myself, carrying out activities that resemble that of a project manager. And, I even have a title called manager at the back of my product manager title, but I'm not directly managing people, right? To make matters worse, you will even find that there are product-related roles within your organization that sound like they are doing, parts of what the product manager should be doing. Much earlier in my career in the product management space, I used to spend a lot of time researching, trying to, find the definition and the scope and the framework to put everybody within a box. Do your own stuff, I do my own stuff. But as I proceeded and as I started to learn, I realized that, see, the world is going from a place of I did to we did. There is more emphasis on collaboration. There is more emphasis on teamwork, on team spirit, on being a team player. Okay? Excuse me. So I began to learn that, look, embrace that overlap. Use it to your advantage. Okay? If you look at some of the big tech companies, or even the fintech companies, even in the African tech community, you will see that there is that emphasis now on collaboration and teamwork, because we're realizing that now you're building products sometimes not just for the local community, not just for the local market, but for the global market. And the more you can get more perspective, more viewpoints, more heads in the conversation, then the likelihood that you get very rich feedback and input back into your product development. So embrace that overlap. While it's good to keep, understand the framework or the constraint or the scope of your job description, but for those areas of overlap, let's take those things as an opportunity to collaborate, an opportunity to refine our ideas and bounce them off the different people typically that are around us and are there to support the function. Okay, so let's embrace the overlap. But why then is it important, right? Why do we need product management? Usually you will have an organization who comes into existence because it wants to make money. It's hired a bunch of people. And it identifies that there are some customers that it can speak to. But the sweet spot of the product manager is being able to identify those opportunities, validate that the problem that we want to solve and the value we want to create is important enough to be solved, that there is a customer, right? And then even understanding who the customers are and who the customer personas are. Who are the people that this product will speak to, okay? And then begin to size from there. Again, don't forget that it's not just about the building of the product, like we said, it's about balancing, viability, feasibility, and usability or desirability. And so the idea is that there's several paths to achieving that, need in the market. Once you've identified those opportunities, there are different ways that you can achieve it. And that's why for some time, you will see that even when two apps doing the same thing are given to a customer to test, there could be a preference, there could be affinity, there could be a connection from the customer to one app over the other. So the idea is that as a product manager, you understand that there are constraints within your organization. You understand the environment in which you're working, the organization in which you're working, the context in which you're working, internal and external. And you also have a view of the goal, because there's the corporate goal, which you're cascading down, right, to the financial goals. And your job is to navigate a path to leverage the capability of the organization, the direction of the organization, all the information at your disposal, the people, the process, navigating everyone towards that goal. And that's where the dynamism of the discipline comes, because there's no one way to success. So you're looking for the very optimal way or the very optimal path, right? And that's where you start to define your strategy, who you're really going after, what is the differentiator in your product, and a bunch of other things, right? So it's becoming an important role within any organization that is, especially in the organizations that deliver digital products. So I don't want you to go through the entire cards around this slide. What I was trying to bring out here was just to section the big categories of activities that a product manager typically would do. Now, this slide is from Product Focus. They're one of the thought leaders in the product management space. I read a lot of things that they talk about. Some of my trainings, I've also done with them. But they have this very interesting product activities framework, which was trying to capture all the different things that the product manager typically will do. Now, let's focus at the center of this head. You would see that there are five buckets, right? 3 buckets, and then the first one subdivided into insight, analysis, and direction. Now, that's where the strategic activities of a PM typically happens. Here you are focused on what's going on out there, what's the market saying, what's the pulse of the market, who are the customers, how are we segmenting, what are the trends, what are the preferences of customers, how is it changing, what are the competitors, who are the competitors out there, right? And And then sometimes the insight may not just be in terms of external information coming through your research. It could even be from the product itself. So if, for instance, you're not handling you aren't building a product from scratch, and you're probably managing something that may have been handed over to you from a previous product manager, then the product in itself is churning out data as it's being used, which feeds, is a good place to generate insight and a good data point. And then you will find that you're taking in all of these data points and analyzing them, synthesizing and processing them, because you also want to, segment, understand your customers a bit more better, figure out the best way to craft propositions that speak to each of these customer segments. How do you position the product, differently compared to the other players in the market? So a lot of analysis also goes on in that strategic fair. And based on that strategic, activities that you carry, you are in the best position to talk about your product. So you find yourself, evangelizing about your products. If you think about Steve Jobs, when there's a launch, it's kind of, the one who talks about the product. So it's kind of pushing the agenda of the product out there. And because of the analysis that you've carried out, there are you can map out a roadmap for your products and kind of use that to align the entire organization in terms of this is how we want to move the product from step A all the way to the promised land. Okay, so those are things that you do from a strategic point of view. But there are also inbound activities where you are then taking all of that information and crafting out, deciding the features that you want to work with, that you want to build, that you want to prioritize, and kind of carrying that and breaking them down into requirements that you can then pass over to your development software and development team. And of course, there's the outbound activities around sales, promotion, and launch. Now, the interesting thing is that most organizations may not give the entire 3 buckets of activities to the PM. They could say the PMs can handle the strategic and the inbound, and maybe perhaps the marketing team can handle some elements of the outbound activities. In fact, in some cases, especially if, depending on the phase of the product, it may be just too much to balance the strategic and the inbound. And in some organizations we've seen where they could partner PMs together, where one person focuses on the business and the other person focuses on the more inbound activities. But either way, the idea, most generically, you would have to be doing most of these activities, and the onus is on you to balance out the strategic and the operational, right? Because you have to be all things to all people. Now, this is another slide that I like, and in fact, it is one of the things that excites me about product management. Because you can imagine, looking at the background that I had shared earlier, I had started off as a software, engineer. I'd done some things around implementation, support, technical operations. And then, transitioning to product manager, I was so excited to know that, you can take in the wealth of that experience, into the product management discipline, because in some cases you are a troubleshooter. In some cases, you are balancing stakeholder, interests. You are aligning people. I mean, you have to be an expert in terms of customer experience. You are a subject matter expert. You're a go-to person around the product. You need to collaborate, right? So it just pushes, the different lane areas, for the product manager. So embrace this chaos, for a lack of a better word, because it comes with the territory, right? But like I said, it is your ability to structure your work and to balance it out that matters. But also be open to understand that you may need to be all things to all people. Again, because of the overall success of your product, you are bringing it front, right and center. So there are frameworks, like I said, or there are people, thought leaders in the space that have tried to take, a lot of all this information and all the elements of product management and kind of, put it into a structured body of knowledge that you can then use to kind of navigate your learning, okay, around the product management. So I typically listen, use Scaled Agile, Product Focus 280. I make very heavy references to their materials. Now let's push a little bit that thought around embracing the multiple and multifaceted side of product management. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to be a specialist in product management, right? You have to know the best practice. You have to understand the lingo. You have to understand the tools and the templates. You have to find your way around all those activities that we earlier mentioned. But one of the things that I see is that a lot of people are experts in product management, but guess what? We're building to achieve a goal, right? And usually in the course of building, you need to gather data points outside of your product management discipline, right? Now, one of the things that I've seen that differentiates one PM from the other, okay, is that they focus not just on how, what the product is, the features that need to get built, but they're very, very interested in how that product is performing on all fronts, okay? So now I tumbled on this. I wouldn't say it was a deliberate thing for me. It is something I actually had a eureka moment around, because if you remember the background that I had painted, I initially started off as a developer, and then because of the fact that I had moved into service delivery, I did some courses in project management, got some certifications in project management, and then as I moved into the things around operations, I started to get interested in how the services that we put out there work. When you put an app in the hands of a user, right? There are several things you need to be doing behind the scene. You need to be tracking the service levels. You need to ensure that there are processes, service-focused processes that are, set up to ensure that the support for the product is on point. So, for instance, a customer clicks a button on the app, on an app that you've launched, and nothing is working. There are potentially back-end services behind the scene that are supporting that feature on the front end, right? So the ability to be able to understand all the dependencies to your app from a services point of view, from a process point of view, was some of the things that I took into the product management discipline. And then what that did for me is that it started to give me a more end-to-end perspective, right? So again, this wasn't something I did deliberately. I really was developing myself from a point of view of my current job function. But then I realized that it became a very, very good foundation to start, as a product manager, because then I could then connect the entire dots. I could see end-to-end beyond the product and the features to how it's performing, to the processes that have been set up, the incident management process, problem management processes, request fulfillment processes, all the things that I know as an organization needs to be set up to support the service levels being delivered to your product. It just connected the dots for me. Okay, so I'm just going to take a pause here. I want to launch a poll quite quickly. Okay, I know that Clifford launched one earlier. Okay, Clifford, I may need your help with this. There's a second poll that should show up. Yes.
Okay. I'll launch the second poll now. Thank you.
Okay, so Clifford will launch the second poll for us. And then there's the first poll as well. If you haven't filled that, please do go ahead and fill. So yeah, I'll go back to the presentation, right? So just pushing that thought a little bit more. I even did some business analysis course, even as part of the product management, my self-development in product management, because, I realized that even looking at some of the issues around product development, a lot of times there are assumptions that are made, there are quality issues with the product, and it became very important to learn the skill around how to define requirements, right? How to define acceptance criteria, how to elicit information from customers. A lot of times there's the tendency or the habit of putting our bias, on the customers we're asking questions, kind of like asking leading questions. But all these body of knowledge just kind of help you deal with specific areas. So again, for me, one of the things I advise PMs that are close to me and that I kind of like work with is, beyond the product management discipline, try and get more breadth around all the different domain areas and the different knowledge areas that actually impacts your product. You will be more rounded, and you'll be bringing something extra to the table. Okay. So I just talked about knowledge areas, right? So most of those trainings will already be speaking to some of these knowledge areas. So as a PM, as a product manager, you need to understand the business in which you're operating. How does your company make money? How does the business make money? You need to have that context. You need to also understand what your organization is capable of doing. What are the competencies within the organization? Okay. For instance, if you at the end of the day, you realize that perhaps to create a product, there are some additional, technologies that the organization may not necessarily be good at. Those things have to, you have to be aware of those things, so that because they then define some additional decisions that you can take, right? So you must be aware of your organization in terms of capability, in terms of the processes that drives, business processes and processes that affect your product. And you must be, know people. Who are the important people on your products? Who are the influencers on your product? Who are the SMEs on your products, right? And one of the things that this helps is you can assess people, you can assess teams in terms of their capability, so that if there are gaps around supporting your product, talking about your product, selling your product, you can quickly step in and address those things. Again, remember the slide with the big head, doing some things around training and sales support, right? And that's because you've actually done some assessment of the organization in terms of its readiness to help you support your product. Then I'm stating the obvious, but believe me, you also need to know the product itself. A lot of times when people come, especially if it's a product that you did not build from scratch, like one that was handed over to you, you need to know how the product works in and out, okay? Because again, think CEO of the product. If you picked any CEO of any company today, that person may not be a technical expert in areas of his business, right? But he can speak to every one of them. So that's the concept, to say that your product, you must know enough, and not just around features, but even around, the technology stack supporting your product. You must have some sense of even the current issues on your product. Don't turn a blind eye. No product is perfect. There are known issues around your product. There are improvement areas around your product. You need to embrace, everything. You need to unpack everything and understand how the products work. You need to get into the DNA of how the product works. From an external point of view, keep in touch with what's going on out there. Who are the competitors? What are they doing differently? What are the things that you can learn? What are the insights you are getting from there? How can you position better? Don't build in isolation. Also bring in the external context to the conversation. Understand the markets. What are the trends in there? What are the triggers, right? Then, of course, we talked about understanding the user in very, very deeply. And the partners, who are the people that you can actually partner with in the course of working on your product and managing your product. From a soft skill point of view, I'm probably stating the obvious already, right? But you must have, some business acumen. You must have on the other end some technical, acumen. You should have a very good balance of people skills, leading with authority. Remember, I told you that you will be getting most of your job done, not from people who are directly reporting to you from an organization structure point of view, but actual, other disciplines and other cross-functional teams, other functional teams are people who you need to bring together and work with. So you must learn how to influence. You must learn how to lead without authority. You must learn how to have conversations, negotiate with stakeholders, rally people around, inspire people around your products, okay? And then you must constantly always challenge assumptions. A lot of times, especially if you're taking a product, inheriting a product from someone else, understand, even though you're getting some handover information from your product manager, right? The product manager before, have a posture of always challenging and asking why, because a lot of times people just take on some assumptions that may no longer be true or were never even true to begin with. So you must be bold to ask why. You must be bold to challenge assumptions and be open-minded as well to receive input. A lot of times people assume that because, we brandish product managers as the CEO of the product, that then they are the final authority on what gets built. Sometimes that could be very, very self-destructive, right? Because you need to appreciate that as an individual, you have some bias, you have some blind spot, right? And there may be different ways you're processing information that may not, that may be limiting you at the time. So be ready to get in that, rich feedback from people and be open-minded, right? There's a tendency to be defensive, especially with feedback around your product. So always have a posture of being open-minded, right? If I were to give somebody like a 5 minutes, crash course on product management, it will be around these 4 things. It will be build the right thing, ensure that what we're building is important enough to be built. Remember, you're navigating the organization and a bunch of people towards this goal. So we need our due diligence and our responsibility to that team is to ensure that we're building the right thing, first of all. Now, after that, let's ensure we are building rightly. A lot of times people, cut corners or create architectural debts in the process of, building a product. So let's build in quality as we're building as well. So be very, very close friends with your engineering team, your software architect, understand the kind of trade-offs they are making on the product. And sometimes in the bid to attack the market quite quickly, there may be, some very rough draft implementations that are out there, but always get the team to a point where they can, come back and clean up. So build the right thing, build rightly, and build quickly, okay? A lot of times we take the waterfall approach where we gather all the requirements and then push everything through development, only for it to come out at the other end, and it's either not what the customer asked for or the market has moved. So there needs to be a constant agility, a constant posture of, build, deploy, repeat, build, deploy, repeat. And what that helps us do is minimize risk, minimize variation. And that's what Agile comes to help us with, right? That's why there's a concept of minimum viable product, which is what is the minimum thing we can do that can show that this product is going to be viable or this product is viable, right? So you need to build quickly. And the product management discipline also covers quite a lot around this. Agile also covers quite a lot around how you can do this. Prioritization is quite important because I always look at prioritization as like an opportunity cost. If I decide to do feature 1 above feature 2, it means that there's a cost of not doing feature 2, right? And it needs to be worth the decision to build feature 1. So you're always constantly in a state of prioritizing what the team should do, again, based on the insights you've gathered, putting the customer right at the center of that decision. And a lot of times people say, I'm building an MVP. When in reality, they're just building the products. Okay, usually from things that I see, the MVP should be something that is, in fact, 2 weeks or a month at the minimum. You should be able to test out various assumptions, via your MVP. Sometimes it could be just a skeleton of an app without actual functionality. But the important thing is you are building quickly to get feedback and recycle that back into the development process, and then build through others. You always need to work with people. You need the people to work together. You need the people to be inspired by what you're trying to do. You need to have them aligned and you need to have them working together. Now, the roadmap is one of the tools that you can actually use to paint, the journey for people. People can be inspired by a vision or to be the largest this, to be the largest that. But they also want to be able to see that there is a roadmap to get in there. So the roadmap is not just a tool, right, for a tool's sake. It's actually a very good tool to kind of align people so that people can see the direction that the product is going. So again, just to push that collaboration conversation a little bit forward, if you think about your organization today, right, if you're working in an organization today, you would see that you would have perhaps business guys reporting to a business head, product managers reporting to a product head, engineers probably reporting to an architect or to CIO or to a CTO, and operations team reporting to some business head. Now, even though the organization is structured in this way, vertically, right, and progression seems to be vertically, the real truth is that value to the customer flows horizontally. It flows across this different functions, right? And that's where the concept of the frameworks like principles like Agile come into place, because it's really looking at how you can organize people around the value. Okay, so usually that team that is working on your project or your product rather is going to be the box in red. Okay, the units of an Agile team is comprised of the product manager, the engineers, the testers, the Scrum master, right? The one in the green are what we call the enablers. They may not necessarily be part of the team on a day-to-day basis, but their input to that development process is also important, right? But we usually call them enablers in the team. So we're talking about Agile, so let's talk a little bit more about that, okay? You would hear certain slangs and certain lingo like product manager, product owner, or Scrum master, or developer QA. You hear things like sprint, And if I were to just give you a crash course in Agile, and Rebecca has fantastic training materials and training programs around this. So just as a way of giving like a 2 minutes crash course, what we're saying is that the product manager has what we call a product backlog. Think of it as a list of features that the product manager, based on his insight gathering, his analysis, has decided is important enough to be built. But he will usually be shuffling it in terms of prioritizing. What should we build first? What should the team build first? Okay, and this has to relate with the real life scenarios, right? And as it's prioritizing, the way he ships that feature to the team of developers and quality assurance guys is by documenting stories. Now, those stories too could be further refined by the actual dev and QA team. But whatever it is that the product manager is prioritizing moves into their view, into what we call a sprint backlog. And it's from that place that they begin to take out different items and run it through a 2 to 4 week sprint. Now, the 2 to 4 weeks sprint is what we call a time box. That is to say, as a team, we've committed that work will always come out at the end of 2 weeks, or at the end of 3 weeks, or at the end of 4 weeks. That is usually decided by the team, okay? Now, the idea is that we're going to pick out all the tasks, all the stories. We're going to pick up all the stories that we can deliver within that time box. And we're doing it with the mindset that whatever we're picking and we will implement in 2 to 4 weeks will actually be code that is ready to be shipped. Means it's customer ready, right? If you were to pick that release and deploy to production, it's ready. And that keeps us in a constant state of readiness and agility. They also have regular meetings to keep in sync with each other. So you may hear terms like daily stand-up, which is really around meeting every day, talking about perhaps what they did the day before, what they're doing today, what they're going to focus on today, and if there are any blockers. Okay, so the guy on the right, the Scrum Master, usually has a servant leader role on the team and doubles as the advocate of the Scrum framework. Now, Scrum framework is like an expression of Agile. Okay, he's the one that is ensuring that they're keeping up to their cadence. They're meeting their stand-up meetings. It's kind of facilitating those sessions. Planning, helping the team organize around their sprints, and all that, and removes any impediment that the team may be having. Okay, and that's kind of like the very rough draft picture of what the Scrum team would typically look like. Okay, now even in the course of your own research, you'll probably see various representation or expression of the product development process. It may vary, but I mean, basically, it's really ideation, defining the core features that need to go into your product, and then creating a prototype, and then before going into a detailed design, validate and test across several metrics, and then do a launch, sometimes a very soft launch or whatever go-to-market strategy that we have. But what I wanted to point out here is that irrespective of any product development process step you see, there is an element of Agile that needs to be integrated into that. And what I mean is don't, like I said, pack all your requirements and scope everything from end to end and then drop with the development team, right? There needs to be that we do the barest minimum. We come back, we get the feedback from how customers are using it. We put it back into the app. We define, we prioritize, we implement, we're fine. We push out again after our time box or after our commitment timelines. And then we take the feedback in again and we iterate. Now, the idea is that you are able to get in feedback quickly so that if you are going off a tangent, you can quickly realign the team back. The truth of the matter is that nobody knows what is going to be a hit, right? There is a 50-50 chance that it could go, well or sour. Okay, so please, there's always a tendency of people to do waterfall, but they are using all the Agile buzzwords. So you need to watch out for that. Agile is all about quickly implementing, quickly learning, and getting that feedback again into the process. Okay. What Agile is not is what you have on the top side of the slide. Agile is not that. So let's say, for instance, we give two teams a mandate, and we say the mandate or what we think we need to build is something that takes us a customer from point A to point B. What I see some teams do is that they start with defining the tire. They define the tire in week 1 and implement a tire. Week 2, they implement 2 tires, right? But at 1 and 2, the guy still cannot do anything with those tires. By week 3, he has what looks like a car, but can't move because there's no steering wheel. There's no functionality to actually navigate that vehicle. Then by week 4 is when you have a full blown feature. Now, that is the assumption that what you even eventually deploy by week 4 is what the customer wants, because it is a gamble. A lot of times when we gather requirements, right, we interpret and process what the information we're hearing. But if we're waiting for 4 weeks to come and show the customer what we've done, there's a tendency that if we missed out something, we may have to go back and rework, right? Now, the bottom side of this picture, week 1, we deliver a skateboard, right? Week 2, we deliver a scooter. By week 1, that person can still move from point A to point B from a functionality point of view, even though the experience is not great, right? By week 2, the customer may not be as sad as he was in week 1, but okay, he's getting there, right? Because at least he can navigate with his scooter. By week 3, it's a bicycle. He can actually move from point A to point B, but he's not really delighted, right? But by week 4, it's a motorbike, and week 5, it's a car. The point is that 1, you'll be able to get the customer happier on time, right? And then secondly, is that if there are assumptions that were made, because you are coming to the customer every time with something, you can actually quickly feed in that learning back quickly into the product development process, okay? So this Agile is what you have below. So always as a product manager, in your prioritization of what needs to get built, this is absolutely crucial, because you want to, define the minimum set of features that can capture the whole essence of the functionality that you are going for. Now, Agile also is not this. Like I said, a lot of times the teams are practicing Agile from they have their stand-up meeting perspective, they are defining user stories. But, the whole point is that Agile is saying, do these things, but the ultimate aim is for speed, is for agility, is for quality. So if, for instance, you have this, if we were to visually, capture the way work is moving through your development team, this is a very good example of a Kanban board. I can tell from this board that the process for development is that the stories come in, we break them into tasks, the team starts to work on it, then testing happens, then what should be there is done. But it seems that everything else things are coming in, but nothing is going out. So again, this is also pushing that thought I talked about, where you need to be equally interested in how your product is being built, because sometimes the slowness to market could be because there are clogs in in the product development process. This team isn't doing well. This team isn't doing good because things are coming in, but nothing is coming out. And guess what? By the time you push out all these things, they may not be what the customer needed, and a lot of waiting and waste of waiting would have happened already. Your MVP is not about getting profits. It's not supposed to be the final product. It's supposed to allow you learn, right? Quickly getting feedback and go back and iterate. Again, I wouldn't go too much into this. We've already talked about it already in the past slides. I just wanted to do like a summary of some of the tools that as a PM, you probably would have to be touching and using. But the real thing I wanted to point out, this list isn't exhaustive, but what I wanted to point out here is that a lot of times people get stuck in the tools, the usage of the tools. And I'm saying, don't forget, it's a means to an end. Your focus needs to be on the end. And what I'm saying is you are doing a journey map because you want to map out, the experience of a customer as it's moving through your product, or moving even through the process of deciding which products to use. You're mapping touch points, you're mapping the emotion of the user. The point isn't just about the exercise. It's the insights that the tools are forcing you to, have, are encouraging you to have, are nudging you to have. So always understand that in trying to understand the users, there are several tools at your disposal, but really dig into those tools and the exercises that it forces you to do, because it's trying to get you to extract the insight. The insights from those tools, using those tools is very, very important, right? So like I said, it's what I wanted to emphasize here wasn't just the tools per se, but understanding why they're important. And always ensuring that the reason why those tools, you're working several exercises or whiteboard sessions or brainstorming sessions is really because of the insight that you want to extract. Okay, so as you're learning the tools and being conversant with them, but just keep at the back of your mind why it's important and what it's nudging you towards. This is an example of what a road mapping tool looks like. Okay, there are different vendors that give you software that can allow you to do this, but your good old PowerPoint is also also equally good. I'm not a product designer, by my function, but I always find that it's good for product managers to have some level of design skills. Okay, and the reason why I advocate is because you can do some thinking, you can do some light flowing, because it also helps you in figuring out some of the features that make sense, or the elements of the product that you're building. Usually you may have a full-blown product design team doing that, but if not, then you can always double as that. And sometimes pen and paper is just fine. Okay, depending on the level of fidelity that you are trying to bring into the picture. So pen and paper, wireframing. You can use prototyping apps like Figma. And I love prototypes because you can actually build what looks like a full-blown app without any back-end functionality really there, but it's good enough for you to put in front of a customer and get feedback, right? So be very conversant around the design space. Most importantly, it allows me connect. I think one of the things that I tell people is that also expanding the knowledge areas, pushing those knowledge areas around product management is because it also positions you to speak and connect better with all the other functions that are helping you or working with you to deliver your product. I just want to talk about the kind of like the career progression of a typical product manager, and it's not cast in stone. It could differ based on the maturity of the organization, their growth, their size and their scale. But usually, depending on the years of experience you have, you would usually be falling into any of these brackets. But it's not necessarily that only. I think for me, for instance, if I want to leverage my own experience, because I already had done some stuff, some elements of what a PM typically does. For instance, I was already kind of a BA. I could gather requirements, I could understand processes, I could understand mapping processes. Some of the tools that the traditional PMs typically use, those things were already kind of what I was already doing, even while I was in the operations side of things. I didn't necessarily have to start, from an entry-level position. So again, sometimes you leverage what you have and pivot from there, okay? But this was just to show you what the career progression of a typical product manager would be. But if you're transitioning, it doesn't have to be this way. And I have a couple of strategies that can help. I always tell people that product management is a spectrum. If you think about it like a spectrum, there is one side and there's the other side, and there are shades of gray in between. And so what I tell people is that if, for instance, you have a marketing background, then maybe what you should be, aiming for to quickly transition is maybe things around being a growth product manager, right? Where the focus is quite heavy on acquisition, growing customer numbers, growing customer base, retention strategies, right? It won't be too much of a jump if you're transiting from a product marketing role into maybe a growth PM role, okay? If you're somebody who has been a software engineer in their former life and you want to really transition into the product management space, then being a technical product manager may be the natural progression, right? For you. Then if you're a process inclined person, there are different shades of the PM title that you can move into. Another way to transition may be also to target specific companies. I noticed that some companies have a bias. For companies like VMware, for instance, or Amazon, they are very heavy on technology. So if you're a technology person, those are kind of the companies that you can transition into a technical PM role into, because it's kind of like a good fit. There are other companies that have a good balance between technical and business, while other people are very business focused. So again, looking at the companies that you want to target that fits, where you're coming from, could also be a very good transition strategy. So this is my last slide, I think. But really, I just wanted to call out the first section, meaning that it's not a one-off, the learning has to be continuous. In fact, if there's any superpower of a product manager, it's constantly being in the posture of learning. And so for me, I wanted to really emphasize the first one. Go for trainings as much as you can, read up articles, understand your way around the tools and the templates that the typical product manager needs to have, find mentors, follow thought leaders, and inculcate that into your learning journey. And the opportunities are endless. According to LinkedIn, the interest in the US, at least in the last 5 years, has doubled around product management. And we also see that even in our space here, okay? If you look at the number of companies that have evolved, that have sprung up, there is a large demand for product managers, okay? Very, very large demand for product managers. And the good thing is that we're also seeing that they make for very good CEOs, because if a product manager has really, really stretched themselves, they would have touched different areas of the business, like I said, right? They understand process, they understand people, they understand projects, they understand the product management discipline in itself. So, they are just right candidates when it comes to, picking future CEOs. So I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, so Clifford is signaling that there are questions in the chat box.
Okay, yes, there are questions. Do you want me to read the questions to you, or you want to take the questions?
You can read it to me. That's fine.
Okay. So there's a question here that says, after a product is being successfully built and sent to the market, who by title is meant to manage the product and work on it in case of deficiencies?
The answer is okay. So if you, based on what we discussed in the conversation, the person who is accountable for the product from ideation to when the product eventually retires is the product manager. Okay, the product manager's work isn't done after the first launch. It's not a project. A project typically will have a start and an end, right? And it's okay to have the team disbanded. But through product management, once you launch, you've just started, because the product is still being used. And if you've set up your listening post properly, you should actually be gathering more data, more stats, more insights to actually either improve something on your product or even actually get ideas for new propositions on your application, on your product. So it is still the product manager who is ultimately accountable. Okay, he or she will still need to work with the different other functions, but ultimately he's still accountable, and he needs to navigate the organization and the functions in the organization to making that product relevant.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. There's also a question here from Nafiu Abdul Hafiz, and he says, thanks for the good opportunity. Kindly explain the difference between product management and product designer, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So, product design, it's really somebody who sits down. They usually will get a brief, right? That, from the product manager, this is the feature that we're looking at, and this is the flow that we think that the customer should follow in terms of the steps that they should take. The designer is the user experience expert. They are thinking at the level of convenience for the user. How should the UI be presented, or how should the forms and interface be presented? They go into areas like human-centered design and design thinking, right, in coming up with the optimal approach. So for instance, they will be bothered. They are the ones who will say, oh no, this flow is too long. If you want to implement the registration flow for this user, we can reduce the number of steps from 5 to maybe 2. We need the onboarding process for the customer to be painless. So they are the ones who sit down and design, based on the brief from the product manager, the optimum way and the optimum experience of the customer on the app. Okay, how many clicks to perform a function? How many steps to perform a function? The positioning of the button on the app, is it on top? When you know that people typically hold their phones this way, should the button not be somewhere here and here, right? In the past, people used to just throw features and the UI work to the front-end developers. But the front-end developers are not experts in understanding the mindset of a customer, the emotions of a customer, and trying to plot that into how the app should look like. That in itself can be a strong differentiator between one product from the other. So they're essentially user experience experts. They do a lot of user research. They talk to customers. They do interviews, right? And this is just to get into the headspace of the customer to know the optimum way to present, right, the app to the customer. The product manager, like I said, is a CEO. From time to time, he may be touching a little bit of what the UX team does, right? But he's more of a business role where he's saying that I know that what will be a hit in the market is this feature. This is how we need to position it, right? These are the features that will get us more traction. And this is how I think we need to, the acquisition strategy on the app. This is what I think the go-to-market strategy should look like, right? So they are defining those elements within the product, but also working with the product design. And in some cases, they're also called UX or user experience guys to define what the interface and the experience on the app should actually look like.
Oh, thank you very much for doing justice to that question. There's a question here from Michael Nzegu, and he actually referred to one of your slides. He said, is it important for a potential product manager to learn data analysis?
Please do. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I don't know if it came up in my slide. I'll tell you why. I've seen PMs there. I've seen product managers who, the first person asked, launch a product. They launch a product, but they don't have a way of telling if the product is meeting the set goals and the metrics that we set. Now, you may not be, as a PM, a data analyst, right? But what you need is the ability, one, to ensure that there are you have access to business intelligence dashboards, right? So usually when I'm launching a product, or even when I'm owning a product, the first things I typically start to do is create dashboards and view. I have a view of what the product is doing from a transaction point of view, from a customer number point of view, even down to the services, right? So I'm not saying you need to be a data analyst. You can define the requirements for some data analysts to help you with the presentation of your different metrics and the different views and perspective of your product. But yes, data is an important element of being a product manager because you can't be in a bubble. You can't be in a bubble. Data is key to understanding how your product is performing and generating more insights to improve your product. And the data too can even be customer tickets.
All right.
And there are a lot of tickets, at the customer service desk. So.
All right. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure that if you have more time, you can spend 30 minutes on that. But there's also a question here that says, what's the difference between a product owner and a product manager?
I knew this question was going to come. So let me try. And to be honest, there are courses that are in here that would help in answering that question or kind of unpacking and demystifying Agile. So product owner is really a role on the Agile team. It's a role. Okay, it's not an official title. It's just the role played on the team. The person usually played by the product manager. So it is the one and the same person, right? But guess what? Remember I said there are organizations who can split the product management responsibility on a product into two. Remember that head. There is a strategic. They could say, oh, this PM seems to be very business focused. So let's make him a strategic PM on this particular product and pairing him up with a more technical PM. Now that technical PM can then play the role of a PO. Anybody can play the role. Any product manager can play the role of a PO. So I always say product owner is really just the role. It's not a title. It's not, oh, there's product owner that reports to product manager no, it's just a role defined within the Agile framework representing the voice of the customer. Product owner term actually started within Agile. It's just a way to represent the role, the voice of the customer to that team.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. There's also a question here from Uchena Favor, and the question is, what are the steps to take in becoming a product manager without any experience in tech, without any prior experience in tech?
Okay. There are probably additional questions I would have asked without any prior experience in tech. First of all, we're not saying that you must be a technical person, right, to even be a PM in tech, but you may struggle a little bit. You understand? One of the things I would advise is to look for courses, that give you some kind of appreciation around technology, right? What is a software? What does network mean? What is a server? What is Java? Because you'll be hearing some of these terms. And so what you need to do is just find some courses that give you some kind of appreciation around the technology space. But you don't have to have written code in your former life before you become a PM, right? I think what you actually need is a posture to learn. Like I told you, even when you're a PM, you are constantly in a state of learning, right? So I would say, to give you that soft landing, if you want to be a PM in a tech space, just have a fine appreciation of technology, right? If there are courses that you can find, they're free courses online. Research about stuff, right? What is AI, artificial intelligence? What is machine learning? You don't have to be an expert in the field, but you can speak to it. You can talk about it, because you need to sound like a subject matter expert on your product. You need to have an appreciation of these things. So you don't have to actually have technical hands-on skill, but a good appreciation of the technical space would help you navigate quite easily.
Oh, man, thank you so much for that. There are lots of questions here. We may not be able to take all the questions, but I'll take this. Many times companies, this is from Rita Nicholas.
Okay.
And the question is, many times companies specifically request for technical product managers. Who are they, and how is their role different from the normal product manager?
Okay. That's a very, very good question. Okay. So, and this is my perspective, right? I could be wrong, because there could be several reasons why, organizations would specifically want, especially the job description, to say the person must be a technical PM. There are some organizations where the need is more around defining requirements in a way that is thorough and that is detailed. You can imagine somebody who used to be a software engineer, for instance, right? Saying that they want to transition into being technical product manager. Apart from the soft skills that they may need to brush up, right? If they don't have, but when he's communicating with the engineer, right, there is more synergy. There's a thoroughness, because the person, that technical PM, used to be a product manager in his former life. He can appreciate the information coming from the engineering team. He can triangulate it. He can balance it out. He can challenge it. He can ask questions, right? Very, very important questions. So what we're seeing is that a lot of people, when they say technical PM, they really just need someone who is a product manager, but has a very strong grasp on technicalities. Because in building a product, it's nice to have the nice PowerPoint and the slides and a very good strategy document, but the devil is in the details. So a lot of times, the people who transition from technical roles into a PM and who have a technical bias typically are the technical PMs, right? But why most organizations will prefer them is maybe in the face of the product or the face of the organization, what is important at the time is not the business side. A lot of times it is maybe the technology, the product in itself needs to be built, right? And the right person that can fill that position is somebody who has a fine appreciation of the technology. If, for instance, you are building a product that is very, very heavy on concepts like machine language and artificial intelligence, there's no point in going to go and bring somebody who is a business PM. So sometimes the nature of the product, the stage of the product, the organization's growth can determine a certain bias for a certain type of PMs, which is what I said, there's a spectrum of PMs. But I would challenge people that even if you start off as a technical PM, you want to be able to also project that you're a business leader. So as part of your development, you're actually blending all, right? So that you can speak tech, you can speak business. But to answer your question briefly, the technical PM is really somebody who has very strong technical appreciation and knowledge. Most times must have been somebody who was an engineer in their former life, and who can bring in the wealth of that experience to navigating the team in the course of developing the product.
Okay, I mean, thank you very much for answering that question. There's also a question from Jennifer Adbasi. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly, please. So the question is there a difference between product manager and project manager? And can a project manager take on a product manager job?
That's a very great question. There is a difference between the product manager and the project manager. Okay. I think I learned that in one of the sessions I did with Harry Baker. A project ultimately has a start and an end, right? There's always a mission, a start and an end. Okay. And what you need is somebody who is able to define what who is able to take the input or the brief in terms of what needs to get delivered, right? And then manage the time, the quality, the scope, the schedules, and align people towards commitments to those elements. But guess what? Once that project is done, that's the end. The project manager moves on to something else, right? So a project manager doesn't have the kind of ownership on the product that a product manager would have. You could have project managers on your team, right, that are helping you, work through, the team's deliverables and work packages. In fact, the Scrum Master is kind of like a project manager in the Agile context, right? The focus is really on what we have committed to deliver in a certain time. That's where you need your project managers, right? To work within the constraints of time, of scope, of quality, and a bunch of other things to deliver on an end goal, okay? But the product manager is a lifelong commitment, right? You are not even just worried about the delivery of the product. Like we said, you are looking at things strategically, right? You're looking at the financial side of your business because you need to make money, right? You need to make money. How viable is that product? How do we position it? The marketing side of it, the training of customers, the training of internal stakeholders, deciding what to build next. That's a stronger commitment to the product. But the project manager is really focused on, I need to navigate based on the task, based on the outcomes, based on the people, based on what we've been told to do, and ensure that everybody's committing to those things so that we deliver on time, right? But after that, it's on to the next. Then the second part of your question, because remember I said the product manager role interfaces with a lot of these other roles, like the project management role, the marketing, the operations. Being a project manager in your former life actually helps you transition, because a lot of the soft skills we mentioned earlier that you need as a product manager, you probably are already exhibiting those things as a project manager. You can communicate, you can manage stakeholders, you understand, you have ability to talk, to lead people, right, towards a goal. So some of the elements of the product manager are already present in the work of the project manager, but they are not the same thing. But it also helps that easy transition into product management.
Thank you very much. There's a question here from Olawale Ale. So he's asking if he can get the training slide. Sorry, I made a mistake earlier. When somebody asked if they could get the training slide, I said yes. Sorry, it's a no. You won't get access to the training slides. However, the recorded session will be available on YouTube and the link will be sent to you. Okay. This is not a question, actually a feedback. Okay. It's a great presentation at Daobi, very insightful, as it speaks to a lot of the experiences I'm currently going through at this time, building a tech platform in bracket products. So, okay, I mean, we have many thank yous here. So what training can you take if you want to start a career in product management? I'm sure she mentioned some of the things that she did, personally with Harry Baker and also with some associations and institutes. So there's a question here from, Olaiton Olanion. How does one transition from customer support to product management?
Very good question. And I've seen a lot of people who are in the operations space that want to transition into product management. One of the things I would advise, and again, like I said, it's really not cast in stone anywhere, but you can start by taking a business analysis course, okay, as a way to boost your readiness. Because I anticipate, depending on your maybe level of seniority, as you are transitioning from customer support, again, from a transition strategy point of view, you may be moving more into the direction of a PM focused on inbound activities. So more on the technical side, right? So when the technical PMs don't necessarily have to be like a software engineer. It could be people who have been doing implementation, who have done technical support, who understand their way around applications, infrastructure, and things like that, right? So it's not too, don't think it's a world apart. It just means that there are certain areas we need to build out. But a good quick win would be aim for things that are kind of looking for technical PMs. You can do things around business analysis because it will really help you to understand how to elicit customer requirements and define requirements that you can pass on to the development team. So that would be a good place to start. Then you can take a course in Agile because you also need to know how the teams work, their cadence, their lingo, and appreciate, Agile and Scrum from a framework point of view so that you can actually participate very effectively as a team member. But then again, after that, you can then start to build out other areas around product management and project management. In fact, a lot of times I project manage myself because I always also have a launch date in mind. And so I'm always in that constant state of I should have done this, I should have done that, I should organize my time, I should organize activities that need to happen even outside of the software development activities. So transition strategies, you can start with a business analysis course, start to find, read up things around product management, target, maybe technical PM roles, because those are the places where you can easily shine. And from that, you can build out.
Okay. Thank you so much. Just a follow-on question from Godwin Atta, and the question is: how does the transitioning works from project management to product management?
No, so I guess if for instance, I'm thinking about myself, if I was a project manager and transitioning into a product management role, first of all, right, the easiest way to pull this off maybe within your organization, for instance, right, within that same organization that you're working, as against targeting something external. I find that movement is easier, okay? Because when you have the goodwill, people can already see the level of your work ethic and your work output. So the jump is quite easy, right? From a transition point of view. The second thing is, like I said, you have to be in a constant posture of learning, okay? There are a couple of links that I shared. Again, maybe we can package a different kind of content and share to the attendees. There are a couple of courses, like I said, you can actually work on. You need to have certain skills, right? Because when you're being interviewed, these are the things that will come up. How do you handle this? How do you handle this scenario? And the things that they want to test out is that you can communicate, you can inspire people, you can communicate, you can define requirements, you can pass on requirements, you can analyze requirements, you can gather requirements, right? You can collaborate. It's not rocket science, right? Because what I was doing before I transitioned to product management was really around implementation, process improvement, and things. So you leverage what you have, okay? As a customer support engineer, what you know is how to talk to people, how to talk to customers, how to resolve issues, right? Use that inherent skill and start to learn how to now ask customers for requirements, how to ask customers for their interview customers, right? Not from a issue resolution point of view this time around, but from a point of view of gathering information that can help you, define what you want to put in your backlog as a product manager, right? So it's not don't think about it as a big jump. If you want to move in a stepwise direction, like I said, I would recommend you probably go for the technical product management roles, or you identify areas where the job function is speaking to that role performed within the Agile team, where you're gathering requirements and share and communicating to the development team. That's a natural, transition point. But while you're doing that, you still need to blow up your knowledge. You still need to get a lot of information. You still need to expose yourself to the product management discipline itself, more around Agile. I've been doing Agile for almost how many years? I still read stuff around Agile because There are different versions. As people are getting input, best practices are being refined. We're learning as an organization. We're learning as a community of people practicing product management. So it's an ever-changing field. You always need to have, a posture of keeping your ears open and using that to improve your practice as an individual. So I hope that helps.
Yes, I'm sure it does to whoever asked the question.
And a short way could be to find a product manager that is in your organization that can help you navigate, through those things, because sometimes it's easier said than done.
I mean, I think we should just take the last question because the questions are quite much.
I still come in.
Yeah, but we'll just take this one. For the other ones, we'll look for a way for you to provide responses to them so we could send to those who asked and even to everybody so that everyone can learn from their questions. So this particular question is from Chiamaka Okoro, and the question is for a product manager with a business background. Is it PM? Okay, for a PM with a business background who needs better tech knowledge to navigate their product build with the software developers, where do you advise they start from in learning software development? Okay, so this feels like this is like the reverse of the other person's question. Does this person, in the scenario, this person really has a business background and wants to transition into product management, especially maybe one in a technology company? Again, play to your strengths. There are resources out there. I know there's this school. Like if I want to do a quick tutorial on certain concepts like maybe SQL and programming, I think it's W3W school. I'll probably get the link and share. But there are a bunch of resources out there. But one of the ways you can do this is, first of all, that the team you are going to join, what technology stack do they use? Do they use C#? Do they use Java? Do they use PHP? Right, so that you don't just go blindly and start to research and read a lot of things. You can start first of all with the technology stack that the team is using. And like I told the other person who asked, these appreciation courses. Sometimes I still do coding, do some coding trainings. I did one on blockchain. It's not as a blockchain developer. It's not because I intend to be a blockchain developer anytime soon, but I just wanted to be able to get enough around the curriculum to have an appreciation of what blockchain is. And so when a developer is speaking to me, I can understand kind of what he's saying, even if I don't understand it in detail. Okay. So there are resources online. I will try and get that link across to you. I think it's w3wschool.com or something. And there are a bunch of things that they teach you around XML, SQL, Java. But narrow it down to the technology stack that your team is using, the engineering team is using. And to be honest, you don't have to learn all the languages. I tell people, the real programmers at heart, it is the principle, it is the thought process of being able to understand a problem and codify it that is the real skill. It's not the language of the syntax. So I don't know all programming languages, but I know one or two, but the principles are still the same. The programming principles are still the same, right? It's just that the syntax is changing. Once you can get the learning from, one or two courses around programming, then it's just what we're trying to teach you is the ability to see a problem, think through the problem and codify it. That is the real skill. It's not the syntax in itself, right? And as a PM, I think that's where people should focus on as a way to just get the appreciation of it. Reading also may not help, especially if it's your first time. So you may want to look at videos. There are a bunch of resources on YouTube where they can demystify a lot of big concepts and from a foundational level perspective. So those are things you can use at your disposal. Me, I learn quickly with videos and I'm reading on my own. So I always leverage that medium a whole lot more. Wow, thank you. Please, if you've not completed the poll questions, either poll 1 or poll 2, please make sure you complete the poll questions so we'll know more about you, where you're coming from, because you're interested in, and also for our subsequent webinars to make improvements. So we have some courses coming up. We have the business analysis, Prince 2, PMP, Scrum Master, Change Management, Lean Six Sigma. I'm sure that while she was presenting, she mentioned some of these courses, that have helped as well in her journey to becoming a product manager. So you can contact us on our website, or you can give us a call, and we'll be ready to respond to your inquiries. Next slide, please. Okay. Yes, okay, we are on social media as well. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Rebecca Training, on Facebook, Rebecca Training, and also on Instagram, Rebecca Training. So we do put up posts that you will find insightful on LinkedIn. And you can also follow our guest speaker for today on LinkedIn. So she's on LinkedIn as well, Adaobi Igwe Okerekiocha. So follow her on LinkedIn. I mean, there are lots of thank yous here, to our guest speaker for today. So it's been very, very insightful. And I want to thank you, Ma, for finding time and having this presentation, and also sharing your insights from your years of experience around product management. So for the questions that we didn't take today, like I said, we'll look for a way to provide responses and send them to you. And if there are any additional resources or materials that you would have access to, we would also let you know. But for the slides, you won't have access to that. Sorry. But for the videos and recordings, yes, we'll share them. We'll share those with you. So I'll just like to take the final words from our guest speaker.
Oh, just to say, I haven't gotten the chance to read the comments, but thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share. This is really what I enjoy doing. So thank you guys for joining and for listening to me, and I'm hoping that you got one or two things from the session. Thank you, Clifford. Thank you, Rebecca, for the opportunity, for giving me this platform to speak. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So at this point, I would say thank you for joining our webinar. I'm sure you learned a thing or two, and we'll be in touch from next week. Thank you. So please complete the poll if you've not done so, please. Thank you.